Larry Ray, known as the leader of the Sarah Lawrence sex cult, has been convicted of 15 crimes, including sex trafficking, extortion, and racketeering conspiracy. He has been sentenced to 63 years in prison. Hey everybody, welcome to the True Crime Squad. I'm Kristi Brower, here with my sister, co-host, and partner in crime, Katie Weaver. Hey Katie.
Hello.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going. We got a bunch of new snow last night. Wow.
You sure did. And now it's going to drop into the sub-zeros again and just freeze it all hard as a rock. So, thanks, winter. Also, happy Valentine's
Day.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, we want to get right into it because we are recording a little late on this one, but we are here. It is Tuesday, and this is our Tuesday episode, and we have a lot to get to, but I think we're going to kick it off with a DNA for the win.
Yes.
Where is the video for DNA for the win? There. Well, there it is.
Well, it looks like the video for DNA for the win was hiding in plain sight, just like this perp was. So let's talk about it. This is Tony Garcia.
Okay.
Tony Garcia.
He looks like his face is melting.
He does. He kind of looks like he has makeup on.
Yeah.
A little weird. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. That's not weird. Just the picture of him is weird. But anyway, this is him. And for once, we get to report on a DNA for the win where the perp is still alive.
Oh, good news.
We've done so many of these where they finally figure out who done it from murders clear back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But the perp is dead, and it sucks because then, the families get to know who did it, but they never really get to know more than that. So this one I thought was exciting. So Tony is 68 years old, and he was a karate instructor in California for a long time and lived in the same community for more than 40 years. And last week he was arrested in the murders of a 1981 murder of Rachel Zendejas and 21-year-old Lisa Gondek.
Wow.
Yeah. So these women were both strangled to death and sexually assaulted. And this is so sad. 2 little boys that were delivering newspapers found the body of Rachel Zendejas, which, wow. How's that for messing up your life? She was an Oxnard Community College student and a single mom. She had 2 little girls, and she was in a carport across the street from her home. And her dead body was found on January 18th, 1981.
Oh, wow.
So apparently she had gone out for the evening and hired a couple of babysitters to sit with her daughters. And when she got home, the kids were asleep, so she left them home asleep and drove the babysitters home, and then came back and never made it into the house before she was accosted and raped and murdered across the street from her home. So her case went cold pretty much immediately. They really didn't have much to go on. But then in 2002, the Ventura County Sheriff's Lab was finally able to obtain some forensic evidence that had come from her crime scene. And they did run it through CODIS in 2002, but there was nothing. In 2004, they learned that a previously unknown suspect in her murder was now linked through DNA to another killing, the killing of Lisa Gondek in 1981. She was also living in Oxnard. She was a retail employee. She'd been out at a local disco with her friends and was found dead in the bathtub of her apartment. So now they knew that the DNA matched both women. So they knew that the perp was, had killed both of them, or they suspected had killed both of them, but they still didn't have anything in CODIS. So then in 2019, they sent this sample over to some of our good friends that do the reversed, family tree genealogy kind of DNA work, and they were able to track it back to this guy who did live there and was a karate instructor in that town at the time, which I
Jeez.
think is really freaking sad that he was working with kids.
Yeah, he was. Ugh, gross.
He had been in the Navy, was also a karate instructor. I don't think he is now, but he had been for quite a while. And he's been arrested.
Well, good.
So, yeah. So he's in court again on February 23rd. This is all really new, so we don't even know if he's entered a plea yet or what he's doing. However, they are also using this DNA now to compare it against a lot of other crimes that happened in the general area during the time that he lived there to see if there's any chance he did more than this. 'Cause why stop it too?
Yikes, when he got away with it for so long.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's always the questions I have, like, does this guy have a family? Is he
Yeah.
married? What does the rest of his life look like? I mean, obviously his DNA was not in CODIS, so he probably hasn't committed or been caught for, not committed, but been caught for a serious crime up to this point. What about the people that know him, love him? Are there people that love
Yeah.
him? Probably. What about all the
Mhm.
people around him? Can you imagine finding out
Yeah.
that somebody that you know and maybe even care about back in the 80s was out raping and killing women?
Mm,
No?
that's
Or is it
horrible.
one of those cases where his family goes, "Yeah, that tracks," you know?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard both in these cases where families
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, he's trash. We're not surprised," and other people that are like, "We would have never guessed in a million years."
Right. Yeah. I can only imagine the upheaval it causes for people when arrests like
Right?
this are made, and no real sympathy there. Just a comment, that it
Mhm.
must be pretty shocking.
It has to be, even if a person you kinda know them to be not the greatest person, you
Mhm.
still don't necessarily expect them to have been a murderer that's
Right.
been just living their life all this time.
And a serial rapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the other part of this that I think is somewhat fascinating. Clearly, he's never been arrested for sexual crimes where
Yeah.
his DNA would be in CODIS. Um, so
Which could
what gives?
mean he just didn't do it again, or
Or
that
he
he
just didn't get
has
caught.
assaulted people in his family and managed to keep them quiet.
Mhm.
Ugh, yuck.
So this is just barely, it's brand new. I'm curious to see it, head to court and see what happens with it. But yet again, another DNA case for the win.
Yeah. Well, good. Happy to hear
Yeah.
it.
Well, I'm going to kick the mic over to you for our main case.
Yes. You may remember Larry Ray. This is
Ugh,
Larry.
I do.
Yeah. Katie and I, well, you led this episode, but um,
Hmm.
we did together an
Yeah.
episode about Larry Ray at the time that he was originally arrested and charged
Yeah.
with the crimes he committed against his daughter and roommates.
Yeah.
Were,
Yeah. You heard that right.
yeah, who this all began while he moved in with his daughter when she was going to school at Sarah Lawrence University.
Yep.
And they're calling this the Sarah Lawrence sex cult. And I think that is not a very good representation of
I
what
know.
all went on because yes, there was sexual manipulation, definitely
Hmm.
there was trafficking, there was sex abuse on his part. I mean, those things did happen, but there's so much more to this
Right.
story than that.
It kind of cuts it down to the knees to just call it a sex cult.
It does. It does. His So he had been released from prison. He'd been in
Hmm.
prison for 3 years.
Yeah.
And he was in prison on a parole violation related to taking his daughter, Talia, without permission and without custody. So basically, he kidnapped her.
Yeah.
And then his parole was violated and he went back to prison because he'd been in prison for fraud.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah, he was a real shyster.
let me tell you a little bit about him. He's just, and then we'll get into what happened
Yeah.
at Sarah Lawrence. I will tell you there is a documentary on Hulu about this situation that is really good. It is from the perspective of the victims. It is gut wrenching. The psychological destruction that this man committed on these young people is unbelievable.
Yep.
So I recommend that you watch it. I'll talk a little bit about that today. I don't even want to talk about most of it because it's so horrific, but that is what happened. Let's see. But let's talk a little bit about who is Larry Ray? Because, first of all, he's a big liar and a scammer.
Mhm.
He's from Brooklyn, New York. He worked on Wall Street in the 1980s
Yeah.
and has worked as a consultant for a lot of different industries, including insurance, construction, and gambling. He does not have a college degree, and he's one of those people that is a real smooth talker.
Yeah.
Got a lot of charisma, got a lot of guts. And
Mhm.
so he's managed to get himself mixed up in all kinds of things that he should never have been mixed up in, but
Yes.
he uses that as cred, that
Mhm.
he's like this really important person. He likes to talk about his time in the military. He was in the military for a total of 19 days. He was in the Air Force. Um 19 days. And so he
Mhm.
actually has the guts to tell people he was in the military, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Mhm.
He
As a
did,
quick aside, do you think we've just discovered George Santos's father?
I think maybe we have because it's
Okay.
so similar. He did have contact with some pretty well-known military officials, and so he used that um, to make people think he was much bigger in the military than he
Yeah.
was, because obviously he served for 19 days.
Yeah.
He's also claimed that he worked for the CIA, although there is absolutely no proof that he ever worked
Mhm.
for any intelligence agency.
That sounds like a typical lie, you know?
Right? Because it's unprovable. You
Yeah.
can't. What are you going to do? The CIA is very secretive. You can't
Yeah.
prove that someone worked there or not.
Right.
Plus, there's some kind of weird mystique, around that, oh, the CIA, that's very important.
Mhm. Well, one of those lies that, like, more stable people would probably be like, "This dude is so full of shit, it's just unthinkable." And
Yeah.
more vulnerable people might be like, "Oh, he worked for the CIA, guys. He probably really knows," you
Yeah.
know?
Right. Yeah. Young, kind of gullible people
Yeah.
definitely fell for him.
Mhm.
So in the 1980s, he owned bars and nightclubs in New Jersey.
Mhm.
He had Club Malibu and JJ Rockers in Scotch Plains. And because of that, he knew a lot of politicians from New Jersey and New York and got to be friends with a man named Bernard Carrick.
Mhm.
And they apparently hung out together, worked out together, and rode motorcycles together.
Mhm.
So Carrick was the commissioner of the New York Department of Corrections in the 90s. And Ray was the best man at his wedding. So they were fairly good friends.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So Larry also knew Frank DiTomaso, and he was part of the Interstate Industrial Corporation. Ray worked there, I guess, as a security consultant. So these were fairly bigger name people,
Mhm.
and so in Larry really used his connections to these people. There's a big scandal around Carrick. Okay, so DiTomaso hires Carrick's brother in one of his companies, Interstate Materials. And so DiTomaso gave Carrick $165,000 in illegal free renovations to his Bronx apartment. There was some exchange that went on there. So there was a big scandal around that. So Carrick went on to become the New York City Police Commissioner in 2000. And then when he was nominated as potentially the Secretary of Homeland Security in 2004, but this whole thing about him accepting these free apartment renovations came out, and he had to withdraw his nomination. So there was this big scandal around that. So when Carrick was being investigated, Larry Ray kind of got in the middle of it, and he cooperated with investigators when they were looking into Carrick and DiTomaso. And so in 2006, Carrick pled guilty to misdemeanor charges of accepting illegal gifts and failing to report a loan. And he also pled guilty to federal tax fraud and making false statements to officials. Just so you know, President Donald Trump pardoned Carrick.
Really?
Yeah. But in the midst of this, Larry Ray kind of gets a big head because he helped bring down this, big politician, basically. He also aided in criminal investigations with DiTomaso. He testified against him in a 2012 perjury trial, in which DiTomaso beat the crap out of Larry Ray for that, which result in some neurological damage.
Oh, good Lord.
So, he's kind of just keeping himself centered in these things to make himself look big. Like he's got these big connections and he knows all this stuff and
he'll take you down.
Yes. Yeah. So, before Carrick was convicted of fraud, he introduced Ray to an FBI agent named Gary Ewer. And Ray said he was going to work as an informant for Ewer on a pump and dump scheme that had to do with Eddie Garofalo, who was in the Gambino crime family. So then, of course, he gets all mobbed up, right? So Ewer and Ray would meet several times a week, and he was supposedly involved in being an informant with the FBI. So the FBI actually installed a security system in Ray's home because they were worried he might get hit by the mafia because he was informing on them. But actually, what was really going on is that Larry wasn't informing. He was trying to cover his involvement in that scheme. So,
as of course he was.
Right. So he and 19 other people were charged with securities fraud because he offered a $100,000 bribe on Garofalo's behalf. And so he was trying to keep that information from the FBI. And so that's why he was pretending to be an informant. I mean, you just see the web of ridiculousness. Okay. So he got 5 years probation for that, which was like not enough. So then these are just some of the things he's claimed. He claimed to have aided a ceasefire in Kosovo. And he had a letter from NATO expressing their appreciation for his help in this.
Wow.
So apparently he was kind of around because he just inserted himself in all kinds of things. He had connections, as we know, mostly illegal ones. And he, I guess, made a couple of calls to try to help Chris Donnelly, who was a NATO official. And apparently everyone that was involved with that, it all got that letter. But it implied he used it to say that he was a big player in that. So then he also says that, he was the one that brought together Mikhail Gorbachev and Rudy Giuliani.
He is. He's George Santos's father. You can't tell me different.
Right. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. So He said that he befriended Mikhail Gorbachev's interpreter, and that was Pavel Palaschenko. And he swears he arranged a meeting between Rudy Giuliani and Gorbachev in 1997 on behalf of Carrick. He just insisted that he made this happen, but we don't actually know if he did or not, and he most likely didn't. So he had a bad divorce with Talia's mother. Her name is Teresa Ray. She divorced him in 2004. Reported to the police that he had hit her. Unfortunately, he really turned Talia against her mother. And so the police were told that by Larry and by Talia that Teresa abused children. And Ray was given temporary custody of Teresa or of Talia and her sister for a while. Even though that was not true, but they made false police reports and a whole bunch of stuff. So of course, true bullshit, scammer style, he villainized Teresa, even though there's no proof that she was abusing her kids at all. Eventually, a forensic examiner did determine that he had coached his daughters on what to say, and to turn them against their mom. So finally, he gets charged with interference with child custody, bail jumping, contempt of court, because he wouldn't turn his daughters over to an aunt at Thanksgiving in 2005. So all of this takes forever, okay? He doesn't plead guilty to these charges until 2010. So he spent 6 months in jail for that. And Talia lived in youth shelters instead of going back to her mom, because he had screwed her head up about her mother so much that she could not go back to her mom. And remember that, because there's so much more of this when he gets involved with Talia's friends and roommates. Whenever anything went wrong in his life, he just turned it around that it was a government conspiracy against him. He was very sure, or made everyone around him very sure, that he knew a lot of things and he had a lot of connections, and that made him a target. And that high up police officials were always trying to go after him.
I'm sure. Yes, Larry.
Super important, right? So very important. That's what he made himself. He's been diagnosed with a bunch of different personality disorders: histrionic, narcissistic personality disorder. Also, when at one point, his defense team said that he has characteristics that are strongly suggestive of pseudologia fantastica or a Munchausen's disorder. So not by proxy, but of himself.
Interesting.
Yeah. Right? This is really important. He had a psychological evaluation during his custody battle over his children, and the examiner said Ray is able to manipulate and control almost any situation in which he finds himself, including a psychological interview with a forensic examiner. No matter how experienced that examiner may be, Mr. Ray is very good at what he does. He can be utterly charming, and one can be disarmed by his childlike simplicity and smile. But Mr. Ray is no child. He's a calculating, manipulative, and hostile man. So this is really important because, this was already known about him.
Yeah.
So after he served time for the probation violation, there was a probation violation that was tied to securities fraud that also had to do with his custody battle with his kids. When he gets out of prison, he goes to New York. Talia is now in a dorm at Sarah Lawrence College, and he just moves in with her.
Can you imagine this?
Do not do. Right. She and other college students.
If I learned that there was an adult dad living in the dorms where one of my kids lived, I would absolutely lose my shit. Right? It's not okay.
No, it is absolutely not okay.
Yeah.
And So, he acted as a self-help guru and counselor of this group of students, okay? And he did a lot of things that many cult leaders do, which is one of the things he did was called love bombing. So love bombing is he was super supportive. He was always there for them. He cooked for them. He bought meals for them. He was just the dad of the house. So this total stranger just moves in, and when you see the interviews of these kids, they say there was never a conversation with Talia like, hey, my dad needs a place to live, can he live here? It was just he just showed up one day and then never left. And so he's living with these kids and he starts helping them.
Yes.
He would spend hours and hours talking to them, and he started, he's helping lots of people. He's helping them all to feel better and be happier. And, and so then the kids kind of started to buy in and kind of vouch for him that, hey, he's a really good guy. He's around. He really wants to help all of us. He's really supportive.
Yeah.
Well, then, and I don't know, I really question whether he came into this with this intention or he was just broke ass and living there and realized how easy it would be to indoctrinate these kids.
Right.
Because at one point it goes from being I'm the big self-help guru to he starts psychologically manipulating these kids to the point that he's literally rewriting their childhoods. He's convincing them that they were molested or they were abused. He convinces one of them that she has schizophrenia.
Yeah.
None of this stuff is true, right?
No.
But in doing this, he's isolating them from their families. Suddenly they have these memories all of a sudden that they've been molested by their dad or whatever, and how could they ever go back to their families? And so he's isolating them from their families so that they're only listening to him. And then he's, basically he's got them.
Yeah.
And he would talk to them. The psychological abuse was unbelievable because he would just talk and talk and talk and talk at them for hours and just break them down until they would agree to do what he wanted them to do. Anybody, it's kind of like interrogation techniques that are used that, you interrogate somebody for 24 hours straight and eventually they just agree with you.
Right. It's trying out those old CIA techniques he learned.
Yes, apparently, or he's just a really manipulative asshole, and he's a narcissist. He just wanted people. He wanted to be able to control them, and as a part of this, he would deprive them of sleep, and they would just get hysterical. And then he started getting the kids to believe that he was in danger because he knew all these important people and he'd done all of these amazing things. And he knew things that made higher up law enforcement want to kill him. And because they were now associated with him, they were at risk of being killed too. And so they had to stay with him to be safe.
Yep.
And, it took years. I mean, they were involved in this for 10 years.
Right.
And most of that kind of stuff would come out after he'd kept them up all night.
Yeah.
So they're just exhausted and their defenses are down. And before you know it, they're believing this stuff. And eventually they basically become his acolytes to the point that he was forcing some of the girls to have sex with him and with strangers. He trafficked them. He videotaped these encounters and threatened to post the videos online and send them to their families to keep them from leaving and reporting anybody.
It's so horrific and gross, all of it.
He told them that they would recover from their childhood past sexual trauma by having sex with him.
Oh my God.
Cult leader, anyone?
Yeah. He's now their sex therapist, of course. Yes. Right. And remember that not all of this trauma was actually trauma. It didn't all happen. He was just telling
a lot
them
of it
that
didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the victims said he did this with everyone. He rewrote everyone's childhood, and he said
Yep.
all kinds of horrible things happened to me.
Mhm.
He had me saying that my dad had prostituted me and that I was sexually abused by him. All
Yeah.
sorts of horrible things that just were not true.
Yep.
So some of the kids get away from him over the years.
Mhm.
Um, but a woman named Rosario and another woman named Isabella, they stayed with him for 10 years.
Yep.
Um, then a New York magazine article came out about him that kind of blew this whole thing open because
Yeah.
some of the people who'd gotten away from him
Mhm.
were desperately trying to get these other women away from him, and they just
Right.
wouldn't leave.
But they could see. Wasn't them one of them a sibling?
Yes.
There were siblings that kinda got twisted up, and one of them got away and the
Well,
other one didn't.
2 sisters and a brother
Right,
that
that's
got
right.
twisted up. Yes. Um, and Isabella actually has been charged as a co-conspirator in the sex trafficking and extortion part of this
Yeah.
case, which I have to say I think is absolutely horrific and
Mhm.
disgusting. She was very much a victim first
Oh, yeah.
and in no way deserves being charged with anything. And her
No.
family is fighting that really hard
Right.
because,
No,
you
he's
know,
just destroyed that girl beyond all belief,
yeah,
and she just has not been able to come back from it.
all of these, I call them kids because they were kids at the time that it started. But when
Right.
in the interviews in the Hulu documentary, it's heartbreaking the kind of damage he's done to them. Even the
Oh,
ones that got away are just they're never going to be the same. The way
no.
that he messed them up.
No, he has ruined so many lives, of course, starting with some of his friends, his family, his ex-wife, his children, and then
Yeah,
move on to these people. The amount of, destruction that he's left in his path is pretty unfathomable,
it really is. It's
because not only did he
horrifying.
destroy these kids, but he destroyed their families.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he did. He destroyed all of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because one of the things he was doing was extorting large amounts of money from all of these
Right.
kids. He was either forcing them to work in the sex trade and taking their money, or he would say that one of them broke something. Eventually, they're all living in this apartment that is supposedly his apartment, although they're all paying for it.
Right.
And if they broke something or they upset him, then they owed him money. And they
Right.
were literally getting money from their parents. So one family figured they paid him about $300,000. And that's the family
Yeah.
that the 2 sisters and the brother were involved at one point.
Yeah. And
They
they didn't necessarily break anything. He would just
no,
say that they did and gaslight them into, believing that they must have done it.
yeah, it was all bullshit, every bit
Well,
of it.
partly by conspiring with others,
Yes.
right? He would convince someone else that this happened,
Yeah.
and then he would they would help him to convince the person that he was attacking,
Yeah. And
or
they'd say,
exploiting,
"See,
that this
so and so
happened.
says you did it, so you did
Yeah.
it."
She was
Yeah,
there. She saw it happen. Yeah.
it's so screwed up. It's they figured that he extorted about $1 million from these kids in one
God.
way or another, whether it was through forced sexual labor or, getting
Yeah.
money from their families
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So he finally did go to court
Mhm.
and was found guilty. He was convicted on 15 counts of sex trafficking, extortion, and racketeering conspiracy.
Mhm.
He has now been
Yay.
sentenced to 63 years in prison. He is 62 now.
Mhm.
So basically, the rest of his life in prison.
Good. Yeah.
I really, really hope for Isabella Pollock's sake that they can find a way to drop the charges
Oh,
against her. I think it
me
is so
too.
wrong. I mean,
That poor
come
girl is
on,
not guilty of
Stockholm syndrome.
anything.
She's
Yeah.
not. She's not. She was so severely psychologically, physically, sexually, emotionally abused by
Mhm.
this person.
Yep.
It's just wrong. It's kind of like
Mm.
the teenagers that did some of the recruiting for Jeffrey Epstein,
Yeah.
who had been victims themselves first. It's a similar kind of thing.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that, Isabella
Yeah.
Pollock will not actually be convicted of anything.
There would be no justice in that.
There would not at all, at all.
Yeah.
So that's basically the story of Larry Ray and the um, Sarah Lawrence sex cult, which is just much more than that. But I mean, he absolutely has all of the features of a cult leader,
Oh, yeah.
and at various times had quite a few acolytes that he did some incredible damage to. So,
Mhm.
if you're interested, there is a documentary on Hulu.
Yeah.
I honestly only watched part of it because it is heartbreaking the damage
Mhm.
that he did to these kids.
Just these young people that were in college trying to make something out of their lives. Just starting out,
Well, and it
and
seemed
he
like
just
this was a nice
exploited
dad
everything.
who cared about them and
Yeah.
wanted to help them. And
Mhm.
by the time they realized that wasn't true, they were in so deep with him that
Mhm.
there
It's
was just
destroyed
no
their
going back.
lives. Yeah.
It has. So, fortunately, I don't think he'll ever see the light of day again. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. And
Yeah.
with that, Katie, I think you're going to wind us up today with some WTF news.
Oh, am I? Yeah. So many thoughts on this story upcoming, but this is this is what's in question. That's right. Chicken wings.
Oh boy.
Chicken wing, chicken wing. Well, anyway, uh,
Yeah.
for just a moment, think back to your grade school experience, middle school experience with the lunch,
Mhm.
and just wonder for a moment. Some of you probably had wonderful lunch ladies that you adored. Some of you probably had lunch ladies that you were terrified of. Uh,
Mhm.
maybe some of both. I know we certainly did.
Mhm. Yeah, some of both for sure.
Mhm. I still think about a lunch lady to this day, not from grade school or clear up into high school, but she was a grade school or a high school lunch lady, and she was very unpleasant. And then after I graduated and a few years down the road, I had gotten married and I was pregnant and I was substitute teaching. But I looked young, super young. And I was 8 months pregnant. So I had this enormous pregnant belly. And I was substitute teaching at the high school and I went through the lunch line. And this mean old biddy looked me up and down and looked at my belly and said, "Isn't there a special school for girls like you?"
Oh, what?
And I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. I had to pause for a minute. And finally I looked at her and I said, "I am a teacher at this school." I mean, I was a sub, but
Mhm.
close enough. I had some college under my belt anyway. But
Right.
I've never not been shocked about that and thought about how,
So rude.
honestly, 46-year-old me would have marched down to the office and raised hell about that.
Right.
I didn't. I should have. Because if she said it to me, she said it to every girl she came across that she thought she could judge. But
Right.
I also, when thinking about lunch ladies, can't not think about that old Farley skit from SNL, Lunch Lady Land.
Lunch Ladyland, my favorite, yes.
But I'm going to tell you about a different lunch lady altogether,
Joke, sorry.
right?
And
Lunch Lady Land. Okay, well, anyway.
look it up if you haven't seen it. It's excellent.
Oh my gosh, it's Adam
Chris
Sandler.
Farley and
Adam Sandler.
Adam Sandler. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
great.
Funniest thing in the world. Anyway, but this isn't quite so funny. This is really pretty shocking. Talking about, well, a lunch lady, a lady named Vera Liddell. She's 66 years old. And Vera saw COVID and COVID funds as a way to, well, get rich, like a lot of
Mm.
really shitty people have
Mhm.
during the COVID era.
Right.
And Vera was in charge of ordering. She was a lunch lady, and she was in charge of doing the ordering of food for her school district in Chicago. And finally, after an audit, well, what they discovered actually is that last year in 2022, the school district blew through their food budget. They had gone $300,000 past their food budget with half a school year left last winter, they discovered.
What?
Yeah. So that was really confusing because they had been given all this extra money because during COVID, when the schools were closed, schools were still funded to provide meals. And a lot
Right.
of schools did like a Meals on Wheels kind of thing or like a drive-through
Mhm.
situation or whatnot, but kids could still come to the school and receive like a sack lunch or something if they needed it. And
Yeah.
so there'd been quite a bit of extra money given to the schools to provide these services so that kids weren't just going hungry because we know that for a lot of kids in poverty, the food they get at school may be the only food they get that day
Right.
and definitely
Right.
the only nutritious food they get that day. So, at any rate, this school district had been given quite a bit of extra money to help fund some COVID era feeding of children.
Mhm.
Well, how then? How could they be $300,000 past their food budget with a half a school year left to go?
Yeah.
Well, that of course triggered an investigation and audit and a deep dive into their finances. What they discovered is that the person who does the ordering, dear
Mhm.
Vera, had over the course of the last 2 years ordered 11,000 cases of chicken wings from
What?
Gordon Food Service. In fact, the Gordon Food Service employees all knew her due to the massive amount of chicken wings she would purchase. Everybody knew who Vera was because she was constantly coming back for more chicken wings, like an astonishing amount of chicken wings,
Mhm.
to the tune of $1.5 million.
Oh my god. That's a lot of chicken wings.
You know the school never served one time?
Chicken wings. Oh,
Why?
jeez.
They're not allowed to. Chicken wings aren't on their approved menu because of choking hazards and just because of
Sure.
low
I
nutritional value.
was thinking, like, I don't ever remember having chicken wings as a school lunch item.
There's not enough protein on them. You'd have to serve kids a huge pile of them to meet the nutritional requirement, and the
Mhm.
the choking issues. Like it's just not something that is served. Uh, but she had bought $1.5 million worth of chicken wings during that time that had been delivered to the district.
What?
So
Where the hell did they go?
where in the world did they go? Well, that's what they're trying to figure out right now. Did she did she sell them to restaurants? That's what they think happened, but they haven't been able to prove that quite yet. But that's what they're working on. Oh, she picked them up. So there's surveillance that shows her personally picking these wings up in a district vehicle, in a district van. So every
So it
so
makes it
often
look
she would,
official, like she's doing
hmm
what she's supposed to be
yep.
doing.
So every so often she contacts Gordon. She orders a massive amount of chicken wings, and they load up the district van, and she drives off into the sunset with them. So she has stolen $1.5 million from the school district and $1.5 million worth of food from children
My God.
in exploiting COVID era money and a more of a lack of supervision because the schools were essentially closed.
Mhm.
And now she's caught, and they're trying to figure out where the hell 11,000 cases of chicken wings have gone.
Right? I mean, she had to be selling them to a distributor at a cut rate or something.
Maybe, or just to restaurants,
I mean,
or
would a restaurant just buy cases of chicken wings out of the back of a van?
from a district van who said,
Yeah.
we have a big surplus of these and we need to sell them. I mean, maybe she could put together a story like that, and people who are more than happy to buy cheap chicken wings to serve to their customers would be fine to accept
Maybe.
that story.
But then they were paying her direct
Her.
too. I mean, they had to
Mhm.
know
You'd
that
think so.
something fishy was up.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
bet it's a distributor, like a food
Probably
distributor.
right.
I bet it's one distributor that
Uh-huh.
she's got, because you don't want too many people.
Mhm.
Somebody's gonna go, "Wait a minute, this is
Right.
bullshit."
Mhm.
Somebody's in on it with her
But I have
buying
so many
these.
questions. How long has Vera worked for the school district?
Mhm.
How many other weird purchases have been made that maybe just hadn't been caught? This is a new story, and so they're still working on figuring out all of the details. But I thought that was
Wow.
pretty wild.
Wow, that is terrible. What the
Hmm.
hell?
Yep. So Vera, you suck. You're going
Yes, you
straight to the
do.
top of the FOS list.
Yes, you are.
And there you go.
Wow. Well, thanks for that. Now I can't wait to hear who the hell
Right.
was buying those damn chicken wings. What did Vera do with all that money that she's still a lunch lady?
Right. She's still working there. Yeah.
You'd think you'd be smart and get the hell out, but
Yeah.
maybe she got greedy.
Maybe.
Usually what happens.
This
Wow.
is true. Maybe
Well,
she has some kind of refrigerated warehouse somewhere that
full
is
of
full of these chicken wings, and she's still trying to move them. Who knows?
God. Holy shit. Well, this is our Tuesday episode. We will be back on Wednesday with another episode. We'll be back Wednesday night for Wednesday night case updates. If you are a member of our YouTube channel, we will be back also Wednesday night after case updates for the cold read party, which is a members only kind of deal. We have a lot of fun with that. So lots more to come this week. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. It's always appreciated. And you know it.
Absolutely.
We are the True Crime Squad. Thanks for being here.
Take care. Happy Valentine's Day. Do something good for yourself.
Mm-hmm.